an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle Book 6, Underlord, Prologue, and Chapters 1 and 2. In these chapters, the further I get into the series, the more difficult I find it to stop reading when I am supposed to stop. And this was no exception. We have basically an Abaddon battle, which is amazing. We have a battle between Lindon's crew and the Skysworn. Spoilers, they get spanked thoroughly. And there's just a lot happening. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. I went through the usual thing this time, where immediately after the last book, I read the first chapters of this book, and then I had to wait before I could talk about them, and I almost died. And I hope that you're all happy that I almost died. Congratulations. These chapters, man, I'm just gonna the prologue is taking place in iteration 986. The main character POV that we're in for this section is Pariana. Now, I had said previously that when we get a brief look at a POV from a character that we had not met before, they always wound up dead, and that it felt very George R. R. Martin, and I wasn't particularly angry about that. You know, it just seemed like that was how that tended to work. And that's fine. This seemed to just be like the author directly rebutting me. It felt very purposefully like, bitch, no, you don't know what I'm going to do. Shut up. And honestly, I kind of respect it because she doesn't wind up dead at the end, guys. And I really, you know what? I think it's a good policy to do this. Have everybody in that scenario in your book, when they get their POV, have them all die, so that when somebody doesn't, it's a pleasant surprise for them to get a happy ending, which you're not expecting. Because I really thought this was it, and that we were just going to see some shit go down and be terrible. And granted, shit still goes down, and there's still some terrible stuff. But much of it is undone in a way that I certainly didn't think was possible. And I don't think that it cheapens things for it to have been undone, because I don't get the impression, for example, that when Suriel shows up, the people that have died are suddenly brought back to life. I could be wrong about that. But it seems more that the destruction of the planet is undone versus lives being suddenly brought back, you know. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Pariana, she's a bit of an odd duck. She is 3 meters tall, bald, golden skinned, an outcast even in the world of her birth. Which I am dying to know what the deal is in the world of her birth. She's referred to as a Titan a couple of times, which I'm not going to get specific about this, but I just read something in which a Titan appears, and so this felt very timely for me personally. And she's very happy in this iteration because it's a weird one, and everything is so strange that nobody treats her particularly differently because her oddness doesn't stand out amongst all the other bizarre things happening. That was why her teammates had left Pariana behind as they were called one by one to fight off other border incursions in the sector. She actually liked it here. 10,000 souls called this place home, and they had brought with them a collection of buildings and machines to support colonization. The longer they lived here, the closer the way would become, until eventually this world would be stable enough to support a long-term population. At that point, it would either become a source of raw materials for the Abaddon, or be split into multiple fragments that would become new pioneer worlds. Which, that is a pretty small paragraph that packs a whole lot of punch into it. That's significant, man. Like, I don't know. I just don't feel like my brain is quite grasping everything, like all of the implications of what that could mean. But the fact that the way gets drawn closer, the more things are sort of made civilized. And it says it would either become a source of raw materials for the Abaddon, which, what does that mean? Or be split into multiple fragments that would become new pioneer worlds. What does that look like? Split into fragments? Word? Are we just doing that? Like, I don't know about you, but damn, that seems like kind of a punishment, not exactly a reward. And I don't know, I might have the wrong idea of how that would work, but yikes, that doesn't sound awesome to me. And immediately, like, I was thinking that, and then I thought I might be wrong, but then it immediately is followed up with, she had long felt sadness at the thought of that day approaching, the day she would have to turn over this iteration to someone else. Now she couldn't wait to see that day arrive. It would mean they had all survived. So she apparently, kind of like my mindset on what that would mean, seems like it's not terribly far off, because it's something that she was also kind of dreading. But now there are corrupted fragments that are spreading. And when I picture that, I keep thinking of that like black growth that seems to be around on Cradle as well. And that is sort of like making these sacred beasts deformed and strange, So at this point, she's alone on an iteration that should have several people defending it. There should be more here than just her. And yet, she's alone. And so, when these motherfuckers turn up, it's just her versus them. Now, it turns out, thankfully, the judges are much more on top of their shit than I would have thought. I don't know exactly how this works, if it's like the presence in their mind tells them that there's danger happening in a certain area and they like get pulled there, if they are notified that there is danger via some sort of like, pop-up notification, or if there is any sort of connection between presences that can be utilized like a text messaging service. But Suriel shows up here within a pretty short amount of time, all things considered. Now, it's very clear that these vroshir, as they are called, are able to do a whole lot of damage in an insanely short span of time. So even though Suriel shows up really quickly, it was still a devastation when she arrived. This is 1 minute later and this entire planet might have been completely taken over. Suriel was, not Suriel, what is her name? I just saw it. Periana is almost unmade. It's really a close thing. So when I say that the judges are on top of their shit, it seems clear that's not just because they are so dedicated to their job, although we know that Suriel definitely does fall under that heading. It's more that if they weren't, what would be the point of them? Because their enemy is so aggressive and so powerful that they need to be as quick. And it's a different kind of, like, when I think about being as fast as your enemy, of course you think about reflexes, you think about in a fight. But you don't think about arriving somewhere, like the travel of it, And we get some pretty intense moments to start this off that really builds the dread really nicely. So there are these kilometers wide, like script circles, basically, that are protecting this world. And she sees them light up, which really, it sounds like that only happens if somebody is attempting to bash them down. The light is a reaction to somebody interfering. And her presence says, impending spatial violation. World defense formations have automatically engaged. Sector control has been notified. So I'm assuming that's part of what these scripts are for, is sending out a notification. And sector control are the judges. But yeah, I really want to see, and we may have, and I've just forgotten, what it looks like to Suriel to get this kind of notification. The sky cracked like glass in between the golden formation circles, revealing darkness beyond. And there's this voice yelling, danger, take shelter immediately. And all these alarms go off. She sees everybody dropping their stuff and just sprinting away. Armored plating lowers over the windows. They had drilled for this, and everyone in this world was a trained volunteer. Many of them were also her friends. I have so many questions about this. Everyone in this world was a trained volunteer. Is this where Suriel is sending people? Like we saw her, basically wiping out most of the population on a planet. And then walking around to the random people who remain and offering them a place to go. Is that this? Are the people that are does that count as volunteering? I would think probably not. I just really want to know all about how this works. I think it's fascinating to be living in an iteration that could be attacked and be attempting to just scratch out a living by farming, but also know that there are fucking gods out there that may attempt to just bash their way in. What a way to fucking live. So these three people show up. People I'm using loosely. Again, the title that they go by when they interfere with the way is the vroshir. And it appears that the vroshir are not a particular type of being. I kind of expected them to be uniformly the same race, maybe from the same iteration or something like this. But it appears that they are all vastly different types of beings that simply are working together to pull the way out of these worlds and cause chaos. Now, I don't know why. I'm curious what their motivations are, why they don't just hate the way, it doesn't feel like. There's a real sense of animosity coming off of one woman in particular towards Pariana that I'm not, Pariana doesn't seem to know who this woman is. It feels like simply her functioning as an Abaddon is enough for this woman to truly hate her in a way that isn't personal, and yet it's just very personal also. Each of the three circles released a white-hot beam of destructive energy that thundered through the air, focusing on the crack. She had over-fortified this world, both in her zeal to protect it and out of a lack of other things to do. Any one of these formations was powerful enough to scour Iteration 986 clean in a single blast. Three, at the same time, released a blinding light and a deafening roar. Her presence automatically protected her eyes and ears, throwing up a barrier around her to protect from the furious explosion of wind that tore up the plains for kilometers, shredding crops, sending a ring of dust blasting into the distance. With her best efforts, she could maybe have defended against one of these attacks. She would have no hope against all three. And she really thinks, all right, they went off. Anything coming in stood no chance. It's okay. And then she realizes that it's super duper not okay. And she creates this like barrier around herself, a cube that's basically like a shield. And just as she does that, this weird cloud that sort of forms into a mouth bites down on her. And it gets the barrier. And for a second, she's like, ha ha, just in time, fuck you. And then the barrier starts to break and she's realizing, oh my God, this, whoever is attacking really is like, not only withstood that attack, but they're able to break through this. It didn't even take them very long to do it. I'm out of my fucking element a little bit here, and I am all alone. So this is when she gets the notification that her authority has been overridden. And she's just straight up like, but that's impossible. Like, it's very interesting to hear how much awareness she had that this kind of attack was possible, but how unprepared she is for the level of the people who might be doing the attacking. She had a vague concept of what an attack might look like, and this very quickly outstrips anything that she was mentally prepared for or physically prepared for, as we see. So 4 enemies, 4 of them. I thought there were 3. My bad. 4. The first looked to be a standard human with dark brown skin, wearing a helmet with a pane of transparent red glass covering his face. Red light streamed from his fingertips, and its signatures matched with what had taken over her formations. The second was an aquatic-adapted human with slick blue skin, no hair, and gills at the side of her neck. She carried a pair of sickles that looked as though they had been torn off a giant purple mantis, each of which carried a dark power that suggested they should be sealed away in an Abaddon vault. The woman looked at Pariana with clear hatred, as though the Abaddon had personally offended her. She could see nothing of the third figure. He, she, or it was covered in a mechanical suit of synthetic fabric and steel. They carried a rifle, and even without examining it carefully, Pariana could tell the weapon carried far more power than her formations had. It felt like the sealed form of one of the judge's weapons. It terrified her. And I don't know about y'all, but I could not help but think of fucking Boba Fett right there. That was who popped into my head. The final invader was another standard human with pale skin and long black hair tied into a tail that fluttered in the wind. She wore furs and leathers that looked as though they had been taken from a dark-furred lion, and they gave her a barbaric air. The black smoke drifted around her palm. So they basically tell her, give us your presents, and we'll take you as prisoner, and everybody else here will just be let go. Well, she doesn't say let go. She says, we'll be liberated. Which is an interestingly specific choice of words that I feel doesn't mean what I think it means when I hear it. And in her head, Pariana's like asking her presence, did Sector Control respond? And her presence like, they didn't respond. And also, I don't even know if they got the message, to be honest. She tells her presence, destroy yourself before they capture you. And her presence says, of course, I'm sorry I could not serve you better. And genuinely seems sad. So, this is her plan, but the woman that was speaking to her, telling her to give her shit up, grows impatient with her having this little, like, mental conversation and tells her too late and begins to break down the barrier around her. And as she does that, the other people on this planet begin to die. And she can feel it happening, and she can feel the gradual connection this place has developed with the way beginning to break up. And there's like a volcano that sort of blasts out from under the ground, a canyon that opens in the earth. Like, we are talking geological shifts on this, of the surface of this planet. That kind of attack. And just as this shit looks like that's it, she's about to get shot. And she does get one shot through her chest and out the back. and it looks like she's about to die. The darkness had almost claimed her, but then it stopped. "Fear not, I have come for you." The world reversed itself. Pariana was pulled to her feet as though on a puppet strings, her vision returning, her flesh stitched up, and her armor restored. Low-key, guys, I forgot Suriel could do shit like that. This is the first thing we ever saw her do, right? We had some gold come flying into Sacred Valley, about to fucking enslave everybody, kill a bunch of people. And Suriel shows up, stitches their asses back together, pulls this shit, pokes something here, undoes all of it. I completely forgot that was the level that she was working with. So when she's able to do this, I was like, oh, right. That's like her whole thing, is she fixes anomalies. When people do things that, are messing with the way, she can just pull time and yank on it and do things. The cascade of debris fountaining into the sky froze, then drifted back down, sliding back into place. Pariana's presence, a squirming mass of silver, ripped itself from the hands of the vroshir and furs and settled back into her mind. She sobbed again in relief at having this piece of her restored. One by one, she could feel the lives of the colonists coming back like candles being lit once more. Okay, so they do come back. I didn't even remember that. The only things in the world that had not been reversed were the vroshir themselves. They resisted, pitting their wills against the power that had rewound the entire iteration. They all rose into the air again, facing the source of that power and of the blue light that shone down on the scene. So, yeah, at this point, the woman in furs begins to laugh, and she starts to do this attack. And Suriel is just like, bitch, you really think, okay, you know what? And truthfully, it's not like they have no effect, because the way has been disconnected from this place. The world here has been cut off from it. So there is a major shift that has happened. And I don't know if that is considered a full-on victory. I'm going to guess not. But I don't want to make it sound like every single thing they did here is undone, because that's not entirely true. It's just the progress that is supposed to be made is undone in a larger sense. So eventually Suriel only has her own power. And I love when Pariana's like, do we have reinforcements coming? And Suriel's like, I don't need reinforcements, sweetie. That's not necessary. And then she just basically rips them apart. It's bonkers. There's a really cool description of all of their attacks, but I don't have time to go into every single thing. Basically, the columns of light blasted down, obliterating him instantly. The attacks happened instantly and simultaneously, so Pariana had to piece the entire scene together afterwards. The formations fired not at Suriel, but at the one who had taken them over. As she arrived, Suriel had taken control back, and neither Pariana nor the red-visored vroshir had noticed a thing. So, yeah, she basically just plucks this out of this dude's hand, and he doesn't even notice. And she dodges the smoke mouths effortlessly. The sickle has grown in size and power. The judge crashed through them. Violet light burst, sending shards of power and malicious intent spinning chaotically through the world, carving serpentine scars into the earth. Her armor had cracked, pieces flying from it. Blood flew from her exposed skin, but she was safe. When the bullet reached her, it met with her razor. And kilometers away, the armor-clad gunman's head flew off streaming blood. As though by coincidence, Suriel's chaotic flight path took her close to the fishwoman. The vroshir pitched over. With no visible wounds, she went from alive to dead in an instant. The black-haired woman in furs screamed, pouring all her power, blah, 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 blah. And eventually Suriel just says, "Be gone." And all of a sudden, that woman just gone. She doesn't explode. She doesn't dissolve into mist. She's just no longer a thing. All right. Shit. Guys, I say this all the time, but I'll say it again. I am not to be trusted with that kind of power. Never should I be granted access to shit like that. Because the number of people on this planet that would suddenly just not be a thing anymore, you don't even want to know. It was just... Don't you just wish? Don't you just wish that you could fucking do this? So basically at this part, Pariana is just like, oh my God. And says, "Glory and honor to the judge. The devastation left by the battle was wiped away in seconds." Suriel spoke softly, the formation in her purple eyes spinning. "There is still much to be fixed. Yours was not the only world under attack." And that is the end of the prologue. And I'm just sitting here like with my mouth hanging open, like that's how we're starting? Oh. And it's interesting how intense that is, considering we didn't see Suriel at all in the last book. Like, and I mentioned that. I was like wondering what she was up to, you know? It turns out she's up to dealing with some heavy shit. So, chapter 1, we are with Akura Charity, the Sage of the Silver Heart. And I was really curious how she was going to handle Harmony's death. I keep forgetting that she could see it happen and know who did it and exactly how that went. But she tries to be sort of philosophical about the whole thing. Like, essentially, she knows that there are going to be others that are... I mean, there have been other gifted Akura family members who have died. And to a point, she seems to be like, this black flame was the weakest. Akura had every advantage in the world, or Harmony had every advantage in the world, and he still fucking lost. It really sucks, and it's not exactly fair, but like, what more could we have done to ensure that he isn't killed? And I love the remembering, she can feel that he is still alive inside this world and wants to go in and save him, and she can't open the pocket world up to get in. And at one point she feels Northstrider going in, and she's like, oh, okay, Northstrider's going in. Maybe he'll save him. But she doesn't really think so. He has got, apparently, a reputation for being a bit of a cold-blooded prick. So when he does not save her grandnephew, she's just like, yeah, I kind of figured that was what was going to happen. I'm trying to find the spot. Yeah. So she doesn't exactly hold it against Lindon that Harmony died in the way that, for example, Sophie is holding it against him that Ekari was killed. She's more like, this looks really bad for the Akura family, and we can't just let this stand. At the same time, he came out of this after looking like he would definitely die, and that means he's got some real talent. The thought made up her mind. She would not cut off the Black Flame boy's growth unless, of course, he demonstrated hostility against the clan itself. He might grow into another valuable asset of the Akuric clan. Excuse me. But she could apply some extra pressure, and if the Black Flame bloomed under pressure, then he would be qualified to pay off his debt. So, I have very mixed feelings on that. On the one hand, I'm very glad that she doesn't seem to be, like, holding it against him in a super personal way, that he did this, like, sort of assigning him villain status. On the other hand, I hate the fact that he's been under so much pressure already, and there have been some lectures from various people about how he needs to chill a little, and there comes another person trying to apply pressure. Like he doesn't have enough. There's plenty. It's fine. He's got it already, guys. Everyone just fuck, you know? So we go to Lindon, and they are on the cloud ship, and what they have decided to try and do is get back and speak to Ethan before they run into the Skysworn. Because I didn't really think about it, but nobody of the Skysworn appears to be aware what happened to Renfei. I actually have a question. And Andy, I don't know if you can answer this, or even Devin, if you read this series already as well. Maybe I missed this. But the whole thing with the Skysworn going to this pocket world in the first place, they detect like some anomalies or something, and they get drawn there. And it turns out, I guess, that it's part of this like every 10-year tournament thing with, basically a giant scavenger hunt with Underlords, or what are they? High golds, basically. They have, this is like a scheduled thing that I would have thought the Skysworn would be notified about or be aware of. It doesn't feel like this whole thing is a secret. And yet, the Skysworn approach it with no understanding or preparedness at all. And I found that to be kind of weird. If this is something that happens on a regular basis, and it's a pretty big deal, and it like members of the clans that they are, they have pretty close like interactions with on the regular are participating in it, why don't they know about it? Why do they arrive to do like an investigation in this way that seems like they just stumble right into the middle of a hornet's nest? Andy says, I think it's a need-to-know basis. No one from the Black Flame Empire qualifies to participate, so they don't know it exists. Oh, okay. Devin says, yeah, they were just investigating. I believe the game was above Black Flame pay grade. They were below interaction. Okay. Well, that's pretty embarrassing. Sucks to suck. Brian says, Skysworn are beneath the notice of the people who were meeting in Ghostwater, and they met early because the pocket world was collapsing due to the Dread God. That's right, too. I forgot that they met early. Thank you for that, Brian. And I keep forgetting, too, because like the Skysworn are basically an informal police force, right? Like, I don't know how they were created, but I don't get the impression that the Akura family is they own them, because apparently they seem to just own everything, but it doesn't feel like they are directly working for the Akura family so much as the Akura family was like, yeah, I guess keep an eye on everybody, and then just sort of let them go do their thing. And it doesn't seem like they keep them in the loop. So, okay. Thank you guys for helping me out with that. So they had found the cloud ship, but and this is the one that they took there from the Skysworn, the green one. But it is not entirely full of Madra, and so they are really pushing it to have it carrying them all the way back. And Lindon has to sort of supplement the cloud Madra that it's using with pure Madra, which means that it's beginning to get diluted and worn down and starting to sort of evaporate. Ethan had fueled the cloud ship in this way before, but he had alternated between providing his Madra and using scripts to draw aura. Either this cloud ship couldn't do that, or Lindon hadn't figured out how. So this, like the whole time, Dross is like, yeah, you are doing amazing. You are really trying your best. I respect the hell out of it, but we are definitely going to fall and die. So just be prepared for that. And Dross just all over the place is out here just contributing his fucking negativity. And somebody needs to tell him that less is more and that he doesn't need to always be sharing. He's got a real, like, 3PO vibe, you know, where he's sharing the exact odds of being able to survive a thing that nobody asked to hear. So they finally managed to land, and they the cloud disperses and vanishes within about 2 feet of the ground. And I love, too, the description of how, like, each of them has been taking turns piloting the thing, but nobody likes it when Yaren does it because she just takes crazy risks, and she does make good time, but it's also really scary riding as a passenger in her car. And y'all know what that's like. I think we have all had one of those friends that were like, I don't want to let her drive, but I don't really have a choice today. And I can't, like, tell her I don't want you driving without her getting offended. So I just, yeah. So let's see. Mercy had been controlling the ship until recently when she ran out of Madra, and then Orthos had tried before, getting frustrated and threatening to blast a hole in the hull. Finally, Yaren had taken over, determined to land the ship even if it killed her. All of those things are such beautiful. That whole paragraph is just a little character study. Mercy had been doing it until she ran out of Madra. Orthos does it until he runs out of patience. And Yaren's going to do it until she runs out of life. That seems right. So they managed to land. And by the way, there's been this owl that's following Lindon around. And he's getting really sort of twitchy about it. He keeps on pointing it out. And apparently, like, Yaren and Mercy can't see it, or they just keep missing it. And he doesn't really know. It looks like it's a remnant, but it's not totally behaving the way remnants normally do. Although some remnants can be, as he puts it, like, sort of obsessive in their behavior. So it's not out of the question. It's just something doesn't seem quite right about it. And it didn't occur to me about whether or not Harmony would have a remnant that would rise. And if it did, being trapped in that pocket world, I would expect would keep it from being able to get out here. So is this being sent by the Sage of the Silver Heart? I'm curious. So they land, and they are kind of like feeling very lucky to be alive. And this isn't ideal where they have crash landed, but it's better than death, and so it's fine. And there's this moment that I find really interesting. He tells Yaren, congratulations on your successful landing. With her shoulder, Yaren lightly shoved him back. Not the worst one of my life, I'll give you that. You could probably have jumped down from the clouds and walked it off. Well, Lindon said, thanks to you, I didn't have to. It had been strange for both of them over the last week or two, now that they were at the same stage of advancement. The atmosphere between them had changed, and Lindon was still trying to figure out how. So, I thought, when I read this, that maybe she was feeling worried that since Lindon was at her level, he might leave her behind. Because we know Yaren is worried about being abandoned. That's just a constant fear for her. Being left behind. And I know that a lot of her earlier relationship with Lindon, she felt as if he really needed her because he was too weak to defend himself. And so having her to, have his back was necessary. So I kind of wondered if maybe she was growing a little upset at the realization that he didn't need her in that capacity anymore, and thinking that what if that's all that was between them? And then we go to Yaren's perspective later, And it seems like maybe that is not it at all. And I will get there. But I just wanted to mention it here. From inside Lindon's head, Dross gasped. "Look, everyone! Look! Here come some friends! That's a relief, isn't it?" And they look up, and there are a bunch of fucking Skysworn coming at them. And Lindon is like, oh no. Meanwhile, they crash landed right near a group of a few dozen people having a big party. So they're all looking at them like, wow, what the fuck is going on over there? And then they see the Skysworn, and they're all just like, I gotta go. And they all kind of bounce. And Lindon and the rest of the crew essentially just make a split-second decision, and they decide that they are also going to run, which makes it look like they are chasing after this family, which is so awful and so funny. It just looks really bad, the whole thing. Relax, Dross said in a soothing tone. They're from the same organization as you are. Nothing to worry about that. We can take it easy and let them carry us home. And look, they're protecting us from every direction at once. 4 true golds, 4 high golds, 6 low golds, and I believe 1 underlord. Nothing to worry about with him around. Oh my god, Dross, sweetie, catch up, catch up! Somebody give him a fucking printout with a summary of what's happened. The Empire is too big for a chance like this, Orthos said. We were hunted. Which I kind of wonder, do they have like GPS on that cloud? You know, like, is that, they just like tracked that maybe? So, yeah, here comes Narukwe. And Mercy says, maybe we can talk with them. And there's not really, like, what happens is they wind up being willing to have a conversation once the fight is clearly lost. Which is really like, that doesn't even count, but I guess, you know? And Lindon's thinking about how the Skysworn found them way too quick. He thought that they'd be able to contact the Aurelius family first. And he never thought that they were going to come out there with like a whole crew. Because there's a lot of them. There's like, you know, I think over a dozen when you do that math. So, I love this moment though. Narukwe stands over them and says, faces against the ground, hands behind your back, spirits veiled, we're taking you back for your involvement in the death of Skysworn Renfei and the assault and kidnapping of her partner Byro. And I want to know what the fuck is up with kidnapping. Like, does the Sage of the Silver Heart still have him in her custody? Because we didn't see him leave. And I would like to know what the fuck that's about. And I love this. Lindon is like thinking to himself, I would like to just talk this out. I know Yaren isn't going to be willing to do that. But it looks like actually she might. He is sort of taken by surprise. Mercy says, just a little scuffle. No one was hurt. Yaren looked from Skysworn to Skysworn, paying special attention to the ones behind her. Lindon expected her to be angry or resentful, but she spoke to him in a calm voice. If they're supposed to bury us, why haven't they gotten on with it? And Lindon, it's like, let us just give a full account of what happened. So Narukwe says, yeah, we can definitely talk once you're in cuffs. And this is the point where I really love the growth that Lindon has. He has been so compliant. He has been polite to a fault. He has tried to be reasonable and explain himself. And at this point, he realizes he's sick of this shit. He's over it. And I love this moment so much. He tells Narukwe, I don't want to come with you because I'm pretty sure you're just going to keep us locked up. And Gwei is like, I don't give a shit what you're worried about. You have not advanced enough to question me. And that was it. Lindon's fear ignited. When he'd been imprisoned by the Skysworn before, it was for no cause other than his path. They had never trusted him to work for them and had treated him like an enemy from the very beginning. They had used their superior advancement to push him and control him and keep him locked in a tiny room. If he continued to allow that, it would never stop. There had to be an end to it. So he turns and looks at Yeren, and Yeren looks at him, and she's like, oh yes, let's do it. And they absolutely bust these people's ass. I love when he asks Dross for a battle plan, and Dross is like, yeah, give me about an hour and I'll have something. Dross, come on, buddy. Help out. Let's do this. This is fun. You're going to like this. By living in your head, I can handle some of your unimportant thoughts myself. Only a few of the smallest ones, but I can keep them from distracting you. You should notice an increase in your concentration and your processing speed, and your reaction should be a little faster. And Lindon is realizing that he's doing shit without even having to really think about it. And this scene where he just like disables a bunch of people, I mean, it's really something that I wish that I could see on screen. And the thing is, he manages to disable everybody and doesn't kill them. And that is really sort of the thing that I think sends Narugwe over the edge in terms of his judgment, is realizing like it's actually easier to kill than otherwise. So if they all took the time to incapacitate their enemies rather than straight up murdering them, that was very purposeful and shows a level of control that many of his people probably don't even have. And this whole thing is just so satisfying to read. They're like fucking piling up the bodies of everybody, and they're like piled up groaning like, oh, what happened? And there's a girl that like, I don't remember if he tossed her into the air or if Yeren did. I think he did. But she's like falling, and it's pretty clear if she doesn't have a good enough like forged body, when she lands, she will die. And he jumps up there and catches her and carries her down and makes sure that she isn't hurt. He's not like floating or anything, but he sort of ensures that she lands in a way that doesn't kill her. And Yeren catches him as he comes down, I should mention as well. It's a lovely little like team effort thing. And when she catches him and looks over at him, she's like, what were they feeding you while you were gone? And he says, sea monsters. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's exactly what they were, huh? So finally, Narugwe says, Byro says that you're a calamity waiting to happen, a bunch of indiscriminate murderers. And he's saying that in a way that really he's looking at this situation and realizing that can't quite be true. Looks like I need to take a look at you for myself. And I think he says something like, I'm not exactly overflowing with like qualified people. Oh, right. I forgot that him and Yeren go head to head for a second. Narugwe didn't come out easily. He was launched back, his wings losing purchase on the air, flapping and twisting to try and land on his feet. A bar of Orthos' dragon breath blasted toward him. And everybody gets their turn to come at him. Their two fists crashed together. Narugwe's hand was bare, his gauntlet stripped away by black flame, and Lindon's was a skeletal remnant white. Madra flashed green against black and red in an explosion that tore away the grass around them. Lindon was knocked back, pain shooting up his remnant arm as though he cracked a bone. But Gwei backed up a step too. He shook out his hand as though it were sore. I need your word, all of you, that you will at least help me unravel this whole mess around you and Renfei and Byro. Then I promise you fair treatment. Which I really wonder if the fact that Lindon killed the person who killed Renfei will count towards him, like towards his credit basically, in any way. Or if that won't matter because, like, he didn't actually kill him, he just left him to die. I am assuming that they are all going to accept that the dude is dead. But I just, if they believe him, and I don't know if they will, it's frustrating to know that they might not when there is somebody who's like a witness out there, the Sage of the Silver Heart, saw the whole thing happen and could back him up, but probably won't. I don't think she's going to be out here like willing to help him. So I love that this section ends with Narugwe saying, now I'm going to have to see the smug look on that guy's face, which honestly, I understand. I've said it already. I really understand Narugwe's feelings towards Ethan. Narugwe is an uptight pain in the ass who, in many ways, is very, very logical. The decisions he's making don't feel particularly, but the whole thing with Ethan can be such a dickhead. Like, he knows he can. And he enjoys doing it, too. He likes needling people. So, like, what, So then we have the conversation when we go back onto, because they get onto that larger cloud ship. Lindon goes and talks to Mercy. And she says, look, you have to see this. And she points at this really cool tree that has leaves that seem to be made of fire. And it's being circled by wild phoenixes. And she's like blown away by this. And at some point, Lindon asks her, like, don't you guys have crazy treasures at your house, though? Like, you're rich. And she says something like, well, yeah, I do. But when you spend all your time training, you don't get to see very much. And you don't get to go out and, like, live in the world. And he's like, how if you spend all your time training and you have so much at your disposal, are you still a low gold? And she doesn't tell him the story. She just says that I used to be stronger. And that I wanted him so much to like push, and he doesn't. Also, I should mention that he sees that the phoenix is grabbing a fire fruit from the fire tree. And Mercy is like, for a fire artist, I bet that shit would be really valuable. And Lindon thinks about just jumping off of this cloud, and then is just like, we're going too fast. I can't do it. But I wonder if he isn't going to double back and find this place again. So this is when also the owl shows up again, and Mercy is thinking that it's something to do with her family. And when he starts to talk about how Akura Harmony is dead, she's like, la 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 la, oh, sorry, couldn't hear you, and like literally covers his mouth at one point. I am assuming because she's afraid the owl is going to overhear, and tells him, I can guess what it is, it's fine. And she thinks that he's being this way because he knows they were engaged, so she just blurts out that the engagement wasn't a big deal, and he's like, the what? And she says he thought the only person, his branch of the family wanted to improve their status, so they wanted to marry him off to the monarch's daughter, and he thought the only one worthy of him was the family genius. And she gets really, really weird when she says that. Like, she feels embarrassed to say it. And just as she does, there's like a jostling of the cloud, and she almost falls over. And this whole thing, like, Lindon's wondering it, and he's just watching her and wondering, like, what she could possibly be a genius in. And, oh my God, the staff, she drops it, and it hisses. The dragon's head on the top glared painfully bright violet light into his eyes, hissing at him from an inch away. The silver and purple owl had openly landed on the railing next to them, only a few feet from Mercy. Goodbye, Lindon, Mercy shouted. It was fun talking with you. I'll see you later. The owl continued staring at him as Mercy pushed him away. I don't know what the fuck happened there, but I feel like it can't be great. So then we go to Yaren's POV. I can't believe I'm almost out of time already. Guys, I may have to do like 40 pages. I don't have enough time to talk about everything. So Yaren is in a separate spot cycling, and she is feeling kind of impatient about things. Lindon was back. She wanted to do something, not sit here alone and wait on the mercy of the Skysworn. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do, but she couldn't sit here anymore. The fight had gotten her blood flowing, and speaking of blood, her blood shadow was as riled up as she was. They both wanted a challenge. And she's thinking back on Serpent's Grave and the fact that there was something very specific to overcome every day. And then starts thinking about Lindon and says he was strong now, too strong. Whatever had happened had rebuilt him from head to toe, and he had kept her from joining him. She had always hoped he would catch up, but it had happened so fast. The way she says he had kept her from joining him, I'm like, that's not how that happened, girl. Why are you thinking about it like that? And a knock at the door shook her back to reality, and she rose with gold sign blades poised over her shoulder. When she sees it's Lindon, she feels like really weird because she's sort of thinking, she's talking shit mentally about him a little bit to herself. And so she feels almost like, did he hear that? Even though she knows that's not possible. And he comes in, and there's this moment. I love this so much. He turned from the door to her, and suddenly Yaren was conscious of how small this room really was. It wasn't much of a room at all, more like a closet. She'd piled bags of uncooked rice into the corner in order to give her enough room to sit and cycle without cramping her gold signs. The training sword she jammed into the wall took up half the length of the space. Her face was on the level of Lindon's chest, and she looked up at him, standing over her. The heat from his body filled the space, and the quiet aura radiating from his spirit was stronger than it had ever been. He looked down, eyes intense, and her heartbeat picked up. He was the same old Lindon, but the strength in his soul made him feel older, more reliable, and somehow new, like she had taken her eyes off him for a second and he had grown up. And he was so close. Lindon stretched his hand out, reaching for her face. She stared at the hand approaching, thoughts whirling in place, her heart hammered harder. But his hand moved past her, reaching the side of the wall. She turned her eyes to follow him. A door opened in midair. She let out a heavy breath as the space appeared, her face suddenly hotter than before. She was both relieved and somehow disappointed, but she didn't examine either emotion too closely. I'll just bet you didn't. So I had just said last episode that I kind of liked that there was nothing romantic going on between the two of them. And that I don't think that I would be mad if it did happen, but I respected that the author hadn't had it be the thing right away. And I stand by that completely. And having it happen in this way as its beginning, I am into it because this makes total sense to me. It sort of feels like she saw him as like a little brother type. And now he's a fucking man. And she's just like, oh. Hi, Lindon. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got distracted for a second and I'm like, girl, yes, look, I've been saying Lindon is bae. And especially this last book where he starts to just be like, you know what? I'm not fucking taking this anymore. And she's picking up on that and I am 100% here for it. And I love it. I honestly, this scene with him being close and her feeling like heat radiating off him and realizing how small the space is and everything. A lot of romance authors could take a lesson from how subtly done that is. There's no like, she imagined his skin under her lips. There's nothing like that. And yet you feel that. The chemistry there and that sort of like tension, you know, that is palpable in that writing, but not done in any obvious way. And she doesn't really want to like cope with it or think about it too much, which You wouldn't. Having this kind of new feeling about somebody that you've been with for a while, you don't know they're going to share that, and you don't want to fuck things up because you've had a really great relationship so far. And so, yeah, maybe just put that aside and don't think about it. So after she gets over the fact that he has a void key, he pulls out, he tells her to grab a jar, and she pulls the lid off and dunks her finger in and tastes it and is just like, holy motherfucker, what is this? And he basically is like, look, I like Mercy, but I don't know her. And we definitely can't have Narugwe knowing that I have this. So you can have as much of this as you want. You can drink everything I brought out. And she starts to be like, dude, no, you have one of your cores is still high gold. You need to take on, he says, that's why you should have it. If you got the same chance I did, you'd be Underlord by now. A second later, he cleared his throat and added, besides, I doubt you'll need all of it. Once you reach the peak of true gold, I can still drink whatever's left. And I love that he's like, take it all. And then he's like, well, I mean, like, don't take it all, but like, you can have most of it. And I was like, yeah, no, that's fair, Lindon. Like, giving all of it to her would be super selfless and I respect it. But I would also be kind of like, dude, really? And I think that's more than fair. And she's just standing there with this like priceless gift that he's giving her, feeling really ashamed of herself for feeling like he had purposefully left her behind when he has gone out of his way to try and get some of this stuff back to her. Only a few weeks by herself, and she started thinking like she was alone again. And she's thinking this right after he's offered her to take as much as she wants. So she has like a sad expression, even though he's just done something really generous. And he starts to be like, wait, is this not going to work for you? Is this okay? And she kind of has to like come back to herself and be like, oh my God, no, I'm sorry. This is huge. And I'll put it to good use. His face relaxed into a smile. Good. Well, never mind. That's good. Don't get too comfortable, though. I won't let you get too far ahead of me. I know you won't, she said. And to herself, she added, I won't let you. And I'm like, what's that mean? What's that mean? What are you thinking there? You won't let yourself get too far ahead of him because you don't want to be off the same footing anymore? Yaren, thinking about, trying to maybe hold yourself back for his sake? It's interesting. Just saying, maybe it's, you like being around him a lot and should think about that. Look at it. Examine it. Just a thought. So, that's the end of chapter 2. I'm over my time. But I'm super excited as usual. And I have to go. So I am going to have to wait the whole weekend and Monday to record on the next section. It's such a long time, guys. And then when I finish the next book, I'm going to have to wait until like January to start recording on it, which I really, guys, I hate it so much. I'm just going to pop. I'm going to blow my stack. Anyway, I can't keep thinking too far ahead. Okay. Thank you everyone again for coming, and Devin, Brian, and Andy for contributing in the chat. And I will be seeing you again on Tuesday with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.